Welcome to Connecticut Explorer's 20th anniversary celebration. It's wonderful to see all of you here. I'm Ken Wiggin, President of the Board of Directors. Before we go any further, just please ask you to silence your phones. I know we have a lot of good speakers and I can do that. Organizational partners are very important to our success, so it's great to be here at the home of one of our organizational partners, the Mark Twain House and Museum. And I'm pleased to introduce the Executive Director, Peter Luce. Peter.
Thank you, Ken. And it really is a unique pleasure to be able to welcome you all here tonight to our visitor center at the Mark Twain House. Twain is, of course, not only an internationally iconic figure, but one of the most treasured figures in the history of Connecticut. And I am so pleased that this event is happening here tonight because we have always been so pleased to be a part of Connecticut Explored magazine and to be a sponsor of it. And so I congratulate Connecticut Explored on 20 wonderful years. It's the kind of history that I love to read, and I'm always happy to pick up an issue and see what's in it next. So thank you very much, and have a great time tonight.
Thank you, Peter, for your kind welcome and your continued support. The Connecticut Explored would also like to thank tonight's sponsors, Connecticut Humanities, Trinity College, and AM Lithography Corporation. I also want to acknowledge the tireless work of my fellow board member Olivia White, as well as Beth Pike, John Alves, and Jennifer LaRue, who were on the initial organizing committee, and the CTE Explored staff for making tonight's event so special. I also want to acknowledge other board members, other members of the board, Espadella, Larissa Siglio, and Kathy Fields. And now for our first video, featuring our founding publisher, Elizabeth Norman, her friend and colleague, Cindy Cormier, and our new publisher, Kathy Herning. Elizabeth and Cindy discussed the founding of the Hog River Journal, and they, along with Kathy, reflect on the future of Connecticut Explores.
This is why I'm retiring. So, Ken, thank you. And to everyone who is here tonight to celebrate Connecticut Explored's 20th anniversary and the future of Connecticut history. I'm really proud that we created a magazine of Connecticut history that for 20 years has been committed to telling the whole of the Connecticut story. From our very first issue, which included Frank Mitchell's very personal story about his mother, Betty Powers of Hartford, meeting Connecticut's Governor Raymond Baldwin at the HBCU Bennett College for Women in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I'll invite you to check out that story online to learn why Betty Powers was meeting the governor of Connecticut in Greensboro, but it's a wonderful story. And that first issue story by Ruth Glosser about Puerto Rican farm workers in Connecticut, and Dawn Adeletta of the Stowe Center story about a tomatude in the museum's collection. We set out to bring our readers stories that would expand our understanding of Connecticut, who we are, and how we got to where we are today. And so Connecticut Explored was well positioned to take on our current project to explore the future of Connecticut history, because Connecticut Explored, I feel like we've always looked forward as well. And you might scratch your head because we are, after all, a print magazine, a much beloved old media print magazine, I might add. But I've always considered us new media in that we were born of a kind of a grassroots public history project with no major institutional backing. We quickly added a website, more recently have added a podcast, which has now surpassed 150 episodes, thanks to, in large part, to Mary Donahue and our partner Walt Woodward. The podcast has offered an opportunity to expand beyond the written page to bring more voices into the conversation about Connecticut history. But there's always room for improvement and for growth, and so I'm extremely grateful to be passing the baton to Kathy Hermis, who has been a longtime fan of the magazine, and importantly a financial supporter as a friend of Connecticut Explored. And I hope I have sufficiently thanked all of the people who have gotten us to where we are today, in the magazine and in the program book tonight. And now, on behalf of myself and the board, I'd like to call up Mary Donahue, Assistant Publisher of Connecticut Explored. Mary has been such a wonderful friend and collaborator. The secret to our success has been a complement of skills. Mary has brought to the magazine so many great story ideas, such a breadth of knowledge and an incredible network across the state. She's kept the storyboards, corralled the authors. She embraced the podcast and has shown such a dedication to keeping it on schedule, producing about 40 episodes herself and counting. She embraced social media, something that but for her, we would have no social media presence. And thanks to her, that Connecticut Explored has that robust social media presence. In fact, I'd be remiss not to mention all of the members of Mary's shop, a kind of a throwback to the days of the cottage industry. Mary brought to us the talents of her son, Patrick O'Sullivan, who is a podcaster. The two of them really elevated our game on both fronts. Thank you, Patrick. And when Mary's husband, Jim, retired, we hired him to be our subscription and circulation manager until Jim retired again last spring. So thank you, Jim, for supporting our subscribers and keeping those important wheels greased and running smoothly. So here I have for you, Mary, a token of our appreciation. I have taken every single story that she wrote for Connecticut Explored. It was very painful to cut apart, glue them back together, and bind them, so that we now have the one and only collected work of Mary Donahue. And as I mentioned, this really only represents a fraction of her overall impact on the magazine, but I hope that you will enjoy having them all in one place. And enjoy your retirement.
It has been such a pleasure to work with our collected staff at Connecticut Explored. Everybody brings such talent to the table, and I really call this my second chapter after 30 years at the State Historic Preservation Office, 10 years at the magazine. Has once again let me roam the state, end to end, go places Elizabeth's never been, and just have a wonderful time. And I have to say that Elizabeth has just been the most wonderful partner, and she talks about the fact that we have complementary skills. That is absolutely the case, and I can't thank her enough for hiring me. Thank you.
I just want to draw your attention to the honor roll in the program and in the fall issue, which lists all of those that we thank, including the first to place their money and their faith in this idea, Trinity College, through Linda Campanella, Millard and Claire Pryor, Chris Larson, my parents, Roy and Nancy Norman, the Greater Harbor Arts Council, and our first friends and our first subscribers who took a risk and subscribed without ever seeing an issue. So many can take part of the credit, all of the writers, all of the people who have served on our editorial team over the years. It was fun to go back and kind of collect back and see who has been. It's really become quite a long list. It's wonderful that Trinity is back as a sponsor, sort of full circle for me, so I really appreciate that. And of course, thank you to Connecticut Humanities for supporting 20 for 20. Innovation in Connecticut History, to our printer, Jeff Blinderman, who you can see produces an excellent product on time, all the time. It's fantastic to work with for helping us to produce such a beautiful magazine. So thank you, everybody.
So I hope you please accept this gift as a token of our appreciation. It won't come close to expressing our immeasurable gratitude for all you have done and our appreciation for all you've accomplished. It's John Ellis put this together. It's all the covers that have ever been. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jason Mancini. Jason has been the Executive Director of Connecticut Humanities since 2018. And under his leadership, Connecticut Humanities has been an invaluable and generous supporter of Connecticut Explored and our 2020 Innovation in Connecticut initiative through both planning grants and implementation grants. CTE Humanities is very vital to so many organizations, humanities organizations across our state. And at CTE Humanities, Jason is dedicated to strengthening organizational partnerships, engaging diverse audiences, and advancing public history. Values that we at CTE Explore both share and recognize in the 20 game-changing people and projects being honored here tonight. Jason is co-founder of the Adequama Educational Initiative and former executive director of the National Tucker Pequot Museum and Research Center. Jason holds a PhD in anthropology from the University of Connecticut with expertise in archaeology and ethnohistory of New England. He has been an academic leader in such diverse fields as indigenous social networks, maritime labor and migration, indigenous citizenship and political activism, and re-indigenizing public history and education. Please help me welcome Dr. Jason Mancini.
Hi everyone, it's nice to be here in such esteemed company, and congratulations to the folks who've been named as 20 for 20. My experience with Connecticut Explored, or as I knew it back then, the Hog River Journal, began when I started writing articles around Indigenous mariners. Wrote a fun little article on a blacksmith of color named Isaac Glasgow. And it's those kinds of stories that I always enjoyed telling, and I love the vehicle that Connecticut Explored provided, along with so many other so much of our rich state's history and diverse stories. At Connecticut Humanities, of course, we continue to support the work and really appreciate the thought and value of what Connecticut Explored has become over the course of 20 years. We hope that our relationship will continue to evolve so that Connecticut Explored can be available to every citizen of Connecticut, to make it more accessible. We certainly look forward to forging a future partnership and developing new kinds of opportunities with our organizations. I'm very excited to be working with Kathy and imagine new opportunities, and congratulations to Elizabeth on your accomplishment with Connecticut Explored, and best wishes in your retirement. You've laid an amazing foundation.
Thank you, Jason. Connecticut Explored is honored that Dr. Fiona Vernal has served as our 20 for 20 Scholar Advisor. Dr. Vernal, an associate professor and the director of Engaged Public, Oral, and Community Histories at UConn, has extensive teaching and research interests in African, Caribbean, and diaspora history. Her interdisciplinary work explores a wide range of themes, from slavery, gender, and the law to the history of housing and segregation. She holds a BA from Princeton and an MA and PhD from Yale University. She consults on and curates a number of public-facing projects, including the production of a series of radio plays exploring the lives of the people and cultures of the greater Hartford region in partnership with Hartford State and Connecticut Public Broadcasting. Her current book project, Hartford Bound, explores African American, Puerto Rican, and West Indian migration to the greater Hartford region through the lens of housing and mobility. Dr. Bernal dedicated an extraordinary amount of time and insight to our 20 for 20 Innovation in Connecticut History initiative. Tonight's celebration of our game changers would not have been possible without her. So please join me in thanking and welcoming Dr. Fiona Bernal.
Good evening, everyone. History is all around us, and it has been my honor to serve as the scholar advisor for this project, which gave us an opportunity to both acknowledge the critical contributions that Connecticut Explored has made in the last 20 years, and to helping us understand and promote the love of Connecticut history, but also to chart a course for what the next 20 years could look like. In this climate of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think Connecticut Explored deserves particular honor in actually being able to assemble its articles that it has published over the last 20 years into one of the best compilations of African American history, so that when I'm looking for materials to use in my class, that is the textbook that we're going to use. The vision that went into selecting the honorees was one that was aimed at highlighting those who are charting the way for the next 20 years of doing public history, of doing engaged history, of doing oral history, and doing community history. So you will see individuals and organizations from across the state, in New Haven, in Ridgefield, in Bridgeport, Hartford, New London, and other places. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for trusting me to shepherd this part of the project, which I felt that the remit was, in short, to help shape an expansive and bold vision of what inclusive stories of Connecticut can and should look like. I look forward to participating in what, maybe next 20 years, maybe 10. I don't know. And so I look forward to publishing some of my articles in the future editions of Connecticut Explored. And although I have the very exciting task of going back to grading papers tonight, which is part of the historian's job, it is moments like these, the opportunity to participate in selecting the honorees, the opportunity to take a look at and imagine with my committee, what can Connecticut history look like? At those moments, I really pinch myself and say, I can't believe this is my job. So thank you so much. I thank you for your attention. I thank you for your vision, Elizabeth. Kathy, you are in really good hands with what the foundation that has been laid for you, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Bernal. Unfortunately, Kathy Hermes, Connecticut Explored's new executive director and publisher, is unable to be with us in person tonight due to recent COVID diagnosis. But I talked to her yesterday. She's doing well. But we didn't want her here. Politely, so. Kathy was appointed this summer after 25 years as a professor of history at Connecticut State University. Kathy holds a PhD in history from Yale University and a JD from Duke University's School of Law. She brings to this new role a deep and rich knowledge of both American and Connecticut history, along with abundant experience, expertise, enthusiasm, and energy. And although she deeply regrets not being able to celebrate with us in person tonight, she did send a brief video message. Congratulations to all the 20 for 20. It is now my pleasure to introduce Andy Horowitz, an Associate Professor of History at the University of Connecticut, who has succeeded our good friend Walt Woodward as the Connecticut State Historian. We're honored to have Andy as our keynote speaker. He generously agreed to take time off from his studies at Yale Law School as a Mellon Foundation New Directions Fellow this academic year to celebrate our 20-year anniversary with us, to honor our game changers, and to share his vision for the future of Connecticut history. Andy is a native of Connecticut who earned his BA from Yale in 2003, served as a mayoral appointee to the City of New Haven's Cultural Affairs Commission, and completed his PhD at Yale in 2014. Before undertaking his work on his dissertation, Andy founded the New Haven Oral History Project at Yale, directed a documentary called Imagining New Orleans in collaboration with Southern Oral History Program and Louisiana State Museum, and worked as a research associate at American Roots, the National Public Radio program. Andy comes to us with a host of accomplishments too numerous to name here, but I will cite a few. Before joining the UConn faculty, he was an associate professor of history and the Paul and Deborah Gibbons Professor in the School of Liberal Arts at Tulane University. He is the winner of the prestigious Bancroft Prize in American History for his book, Katrina, A History, 1915 to 2015, a book the Southern Review of Books called An Urgent Call to Action. In the aftermath of the recent destruction caused by Hurricane Ian, we are reminded of the importance of this history. A historian of the modern United States, his research examines how disasters give rise to questions not only about environmental change, but about race and class, inequality and the welfare of state, urban development, and community trauma. We are so fortunate to have a historian of Andy's immense talent and compassion for humanity as our state historian and as our speaker this evening to usher in the future of Connecticut history. Andy?
Good evening, everybody. Well, chutzpah is the Yiddish word that I learned from my grandmother's that probably best captures the sort of nerve it takes for me to presume to speak here tonight at the celebration of 20 years of an extraordinary magazine that I personally had absolutely no role in whatsoever. That said, I was grateful for the invitation to join you, and I comforted myself that everybody here would understand that history often involves telling other people's stories. So I figured it would be okay. I would just use my time tonight to reflect on the achievement of Elizabeth Norman. Consider the creativity and tenacity it takes to summon something out of nothing and then to sustain it for 20 years. But then after I committed to speaking, Kathy Hermes gave me rather strict instructions, which I understood come from Elizabeth herself, that I should not talk about the history of the Opera Journal or Connecticut Explored magazine. Instead, they wanted me to talk about the future of Connecticut's history. Now, I did learn a great deal about Elizabeth from this direction. It is selfless. It is visionary. But please understand that in all of my long education as a historian, I'm not taking a single course on the future. It's the only subject where historians can claim no special expertise. And then finally, again, after I heard it committed, I asked Kathy when she wanted me to speak, and she said just before the reception. So here I am introducing myself to you as the new state historian, a freeloader on the hard work of others, speaking to a subject I claim no special expertise to, and standing as the only obstacle between you and the booze. So you will forgive me if I'm a little bit anxious. But not too anxious. Not too anxious, because this new issue of Connecticut Explored that we've all been reading this fall, celebrating, I know, your work, the work of 20 game-changing historians, institutions. Together, that offers a vision of the future of Connecticut history. So what I thought I might be able to do tonight is to try to reflect that vision back to you, and to add a few thoughts along the way about why I find that vision so inspiring and compelling. I mean, just consider the story that this new issue tells us, the story you tell us about Connecticut. It starts some 12,000 years ago, towards the end of the last ice age, when the ice sheets melted, and this region's first inhabitants arrived. As part of the history being excavated at the Eastern Pequot Archaeological Field School, and thank goodness, because these are desperately needed histories now. In this time of climate crisis, they help us to reflect on how moving and adapting to a changing climate is not new. Rather, it's one of our oldest human stories. And in this way, as in so many others, Indigenous history doesn't recede into the past, it resounds into the future. The story told by the historians whose work we celebrate tonight also documents how often in our collective past, benefits for some have been tallied as costs for others. The Land Grab Connecticut website, for example, details the colonial dispossession that helped give rise to my employer, the University of Connecticut. And the Witness Stones Project memorializes the contributions of enslaved people across the state. These projects both model a kind of accounting, giving us a more honest balance sheet, not just for the past, but for the production of the world as we encounter it today. Distinctions of race and nationality often structure those balance sheets because they've long structured American inequality, which makes the work of the Ancient Burying Ground Association particularly poignant and provocative. As they document, just about anyone who died in Hartford between 1640 and the early 19th century was buried there, regardless of race or class or other social distinctions. They all came together in death here, is how the association puts it. Death, perhaps more so than in life. And that tension between the pursuit of equality on the one hand and the pursuit of white supremacy on the other is at the center of so many of the stories that you offer us. I see that struggle for justice in the work of the Hartford Heritage Project, and in particular, their project on the Talcott Street Congregational Church, founded by African Americans, when their white neighbors denied them the respect of equal worship. I see the struggle for justice, too, in the On the Line project by Jack Doherty and his colleagues at Trinity, which considers how schooling and housing and civil rights shape Hartford and the suburbs. And I see the struggle for justice in the Summers of Freedom project on Martin Luther King Jr.'s formative time in Simsbury. And just as in the case of climate change, where we can encounter a 12,000-year-old history and catch a glimpse of ourselves in it, your work reminds us that the great contest over what justice is or ought to mean that shapes our contemporary political debates predates Connecticut's existence and informs all of them. When we may often feel as if we're encountering the question for the first time, but good histories like these can unlock the storehouse of past experience. And your work teaches, too, that it's not just the stories themselves, but how you tell them that matters. Of course, we celebrate the heroic efforts of the Connecticut Historical Society, the Connecticut State Library, the Hartford History Center, the Public Library, to care for and to make accessible the stuff of the past. And at the same time, I think of how Elena Rosario draws from the documentary archival, also using oral histories, to create her portrait of Hartford's Puerto Rican community. And I think of the ways that Pablo Delano reflects on this community in visual art. The Mary and Eliza Freeman Center for History and Community expands our understanding of Bridgeport's 19th century Little Liberia community in its thoughtful stewardship of the oldest houses built by African Americans in the state. The Keeler Tavern Museum and History Center considers the at once parallel and perpendicular lives of white and black women in 19th century Ridgefield in a play. The tours curated by the Ethnic Heritage Center in New Haven, the Black Heritage Trail in New London, and by Steve Thornton's Shoe Leather History Project all remind us that our present is history's future, and we walk through it every day. Taken together, it calls to mind a passage from Ocean Vuong, another game changer recognized this evening. I hope you know his amazing book, On This Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, is set right here in this part of Connecticut. Vuong writes, and I quote, "In Vietnamese, the word for missing someone and remembering them is the same, yeah? Sometimes when you ask me over the phone, Gong ya me kong, I flinch, thinking you meant, do you remember me? I miss you more than I remember you. I miss you more than I remember you. I construe this to mean in part that the history we need most is often the history we know least." In all of this historical work that I've surveyed just now, you are variously careful and painful and loving and tedious and respectful and necessary work to learn more about Connecticut. These efforts to remember who we were and who we are, fueled often by the sense of loss, of missing, of deprivation, because we don't yet fully know. I imagine something of that feeling might underlie Steve Harris and Charles Steele Sr.'s efforts to recognize William Henry Jacklin, Hartford's first black firefighter, the desire to better understand how our predecessors made our lives even possible. After all, history is the study of how change is possible. As I tell my students on the first day of class, history is not primarily about the past. It is about the process by which things come to pass. History is the transformation of the past into the present. And this is where Benny Subu comes in, along with the other high school students representing this inspiring alliance of Students for Educational Justice, Hearing Youth Voices, Connecticut Students for a Dream, Citywide Youth Coalition, Connecticut Black and Brown Student Union, all of them lobbied for the passage of Public Act 1912. That bill ensures that African American and Black and Puerto Rican and Latinx studies will be part of the public school curriculum. As you know, a related bill improves our state's curriculum with a similar commitment to Native American studies. I want to linger on this achievement. I want to recognize that it comes at a time when many states are doing precisely the opposite, considering legislation, sometimes passing legislation, that precludes teaching Black studies, Latinx studies, or American history more generally, banning discussion of so-called divisive concepts, removing books from libraries. Those of us who join Connecticut students in pushing for a more inclusive curriculum, and those who oppose it, we share an understanding of the stakes. History defines who we are. A sense of history can limit or expand our sense of what is possible, for better and for worse. And the students who helped Representative Bobby Gibson to secure the passage of Public Act 1912, they were not only working on behalf of telling the truth about ourselves and our pasts, which is no modest cause itself. They did it because they know that by working to change our understanding of the past, they were working to change our understanding of the possible future. Their activism called to my mind a song lyric that in truth is nearly always stuck in my head, written by Tony Pearson. Some people say Connecticut can't rock, he observed in the pioneering rap single he recorded in New Haven in 1980 under the name Mr. Magic. But first of all, I'd like to let you all know that I'm here to bust you out in stereo. Stereo. The pluralist sound. With that word, I think Mr. Magic might have had in mind something similar to what Wallace Stevens, the Hartford insurance executive and Pulitzer Prize-winning writer, had in mind in 1955 when he wrote his great poem called An Ordinary Evening in New Haven. What was necessary was a larger poem for a larger audience. In other words, a more capacious sense of whose history is Connecticut's history, and therefore whose future is Connecticut's future. Benny and Subu and the other students who lobbied for Public Act 1912 were helping to write that larger poem. Connecticut Explored helps to reach that larger audience. As I come to the end of my short time tonight, I don't want to shy from a plain statement of the truth. Challenges we face collectively are enormous. We gather tonight in a world, a country, a state, a city, each divided, fractured in so many ways, sometimes fatally so. History offers no refuge from these divisions and no escape from politics. But doing public history the way Connecticut Explored has done it these past 20 years, the way those of you whose work we recognize tonight have done, demonstrates what a productive challenge in trying to write a true history can be. How can we integrate an understanding of our tremendous achievements and our terrible failures, our impulses to generosity and our impulses to cruelty? How can we tell stories about ourselves collectively without glossing over the distinctions that define us as individuals and unique communities? Stories that are true to our experience as humans, but also true to our experience as Pequot women or Puerto Rican men, as agricultural workers or firefighters or Black firefighters, and on and on. The ambition to write a kind of collective autobiography of ourselves as Connecticut thus presents the awesome challenge of democracy itself. So, I won't loathe to stand between us and the alcohol even a moment longer. But when you see me shortly with a glass in my hand, please know that I'm raising it to Elizabeth Norman, to Mary Donahue, and to the others who have made and sustained Connecticut Explored for these 20 years as a convenient space for and a beautiful record of our earnest attempts to work on these all-important questions, and raising the glass as well to all of you whose work helps us to know who we are and who we might yet be. Thank you.
Andy, thank you for those thought-provoking and inspirational remarks. As we close our program and move to the reception, I just want to say thank you again for being with us on this special night. Your presence here tonight means a lot to us, but we also hope Connecticut Explored will continue to be a part of your lives. If you are a writer, consider writing for us. If you have ideas for articles, let us know. And if you can help us honor Connecticut Explored's 20th anniversary, ensure its future by making a contribution to the Fund for Excellence in Publishing. And it wasn't going to be up there, but there are little cards out there that tell you how you can text your donations. We also on our website have a button where you can donate. So I hope you will There it is. Get out your, now you get out your phones and you can text to us. We would appreciate that. And before I release you for that warning and whatever, all of those of you that were in the 20 for 20, I know you've had your individual group photos. We're going to take one big group photo, so meet out in front of where we did the other photos. Everybody that was involved in 20 for 20, and we'll do that. And so, I now, let's enjoy conversation or refreshments in the lobby. And thank you again.